And so they created an image that represented strength to worship the God of strength. And so God did not say, don't make any graven image of any false god. He said, don't make any graven image at all. Not just of a false god, but don't even make a graven image of the true God. And the reason that he said that was because he wanted humanity to understand that if you tried to illustrate my divine nature, any illustration that you try and create of my divine nature will always be insufficient. So don't just not make a graven image of a false god. Don't even make a graven image of the true God, because your illustration of me will always fall short of how great I truly am. And so God said, if man cannot make an image of me, I'll just make an image of myself. The writer of Hebrews said that he was the brightness of God's glory and the express image of God's person. He is the image of that invisible God. Moses saw an insufficient image because what Moses saw was the invisible God. But man was able to see in the New Testament the sufficient image, which was the image of that invisible God. But your perspective of this God matters, because in Matthew 16, that image looked at his disciples and he asked a very broad question. He said, who do men say that I am? And they responded and say, well, some say you're Elias, and some say you're Jeremiah or John the Baptist or one of the other prophets. They were looking through the lens of somebody else's revelation. And that revelation was not incorrect. It was just incomplete. He was a prophet, but he was not just a prophet. And so they had an incomplete revelation. They had an incomplete revelation of this image of this invisible God. And so Jesus brings a little closer to home, and he says, okay, I'm glad to know what everybody else thinks about me, but now I want to know, who do you say that I am? Can I tell you, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks about him if you don't know who he is. Because when your revelation is limited to what everybody else thinks about him, it may not be an incorrect revelation, but it will be an incomplete revelation. But I believe before this youth convention is over, you're not just going to leave here with a revelation of what your pastor thinks about him, or what your youth pastor thinks about him, or what your mom or your dad thinks about him, but you're going to leave here with a revelation of who Jesus is.